So David, what was your first reaction when you read I Know in Part? It came out about 20 years ago in 2000.
My first reaction was that I was happy that my father had put down on paper stories that I'd heard as a boy that I could never tell the way he did, but I wanted my children and their children to read. This was the world that my father grew up in, with his special eye and sense of humor. It was the world of a young Armenian American boy in California in the 1920s and 30s, then going to war. And I thought those stories were special. The idea that Armenian readers can now read them, not just my children and my grandchildren, but Armenians and their children can read them. I hope laugh at the funny parts, feel the emotion we felt as a family. That makes me happier than I can say.
In some ways, the autobiography of your father is also somehow is the history of Armenian community in United States. My first reaction was, oh my God, he knew Sarayan. Oh my God, he knew Mamoulian. Oh my God, he knew Michael Arlen. So it's kind of kaleidoscope, all the famous American Armenians who live in California. Did you feel the part that your family, your father, was a part of this legendary people who grew up or lived at that time in California?
So the person I should mention before my dad is my grandfather, David Ignatius, HB, we called him, who was a man who was larger than life. He just was a bear of a man, and he was really the leader of the early Armenian community in Los Angeles. It happened that he settled in Glendale. My father likes to say that his family was the first Armenian family to live in Glendale. But my grandfather was a charismatic person, and he attracted around him all of the brilliant Armenian artists of the day. He got to know William Saroyan because his best friend was Willie's brother, Aram Saroyan. So the two of them would play tricks on friends. They did a terrible trick on their grandmother, which my father tells a story in the book, pretending to do a radio service from the church and shaking the coins. So he got to know the Saroyan family. Ruben Mamoulian, the great Armenian-American film director, so extraordinary. My father actually worked on the Warner Brothers lot for Mamoulian and tells very funny stories about being a young boy on the lot carrying messages to Ronald Reagan and this film star and that.
He was in Mamoulian films.
He was in Mamoulian films. We used to, as children, we would all sit by the television set and wait for the moment in Becky Sharp, which was one of Mamoulian's films, where there's a pillow fight. And my father's one of the children throwing a pillow, and we go, oh, look, there's Pop. There was another film called High, Wide, and Handsome, where my father walks across a western street and has some speaking lines. My father said the other day he earned $50 saying those few sentences, which back then, it was the Depression, was a lot of money. My father is a man of so many parts. Armenians know him as a former Secretary of the Navy, as a very senior official of our government, and are proud of him, as I'm proud of him, as his son, for those great achievements. What I know about him, himself in time, of the people who surrounded him, my grandmother, my father's mother, was a wonderful artist, a pianist, a woman with just deep, passionate beliefs in peace and reconciliation. My father carries her story forward. So the wonderful thing about the book is it opens this personality to much wider readership.
You wrote in your preface, and also the title of the book, Now I Know in Part, somehow reflects the humbleness of his personality. Do you think it's somehow a generational thing in comparison to right now, to this generation that know everything or can find everything at Google?
My father's generation did have that humility. You always said less than you knew. You never wanted to brag or take credit. It was unmanly to talk loud like that. My father, for many years, never really told me much about his service in the Navy during what was the greatest naval battle in history.
Yeah.
He just didn't talk about it. So I think that was just the way that people behaved then. It was part of their strength and reserve. And it was a quality that Americans learned in America. Armenians are, kind of, my grandfather used to give speeches. My father was a more careful and correct man. What's wonderful for me is to see that at the end of his life, he's found this rich voice in which to tell the stories that he knew as a boy. It's, in a sense, his life has come full circle back to where it began.
Was he role model to you and to Eddie?
So for both me and my brother, my father is a hero. He also, I should say, this sounds sentimental, is our closest friend. My father has a gift which is unusual, his rules. So when I dropped out of Harvard, my father was really upset. But he never told me that I had to go back. That he just said, you'll find your way.
Not a classical military man that you should.
He didn't crack the whip. Yeah. He let me find my own balance and my own way in the world. Then I could be my own man. It made it easier. If you're the son of a strong man, you either try to be just like him or you get broken by him. But my father gave me a chance to be my own man. And he gave my brother the same chance. And I think that's why I learned a lot from him about being a parent. It's having that ability to be flexible, not rigid.
So did you pass those kind of strategy to your kids?
So I have 3 daughters, so it's easier for me. But my daughters, I've tried to encourage them to take risks, to do the unconventional, and they're all achieving great things in the world. So I believe that the spirit that my father has and has given them as their grandfather is very much alive in them.
You are the 3rd generation American Armenian. Do you think your children will be somehow connected to Armenia, or it's a generation that doesn't feel the connection that you have or your father has?
My daughters, for whatever reason, do feel a deep connection to Armenia. One of my daughters has as her middle name Avni, which is the name of one of my relatives who perished in the genocide, a name that is very special for us. Each of my children has expressed a desire to come here to Yerevan and to find their Armenian stories. So I think there is something, it's just a truth about the Armenian people. There's something special and powerful that we have that gets carried on to our family. So I think in the diaspora, I know people in Armenia worry sometimes the diaspora is growing too separate from Armenia. Yeah. We're living our lives in the best way we can, but nobody in Armenia should think that we forget, that we don't try to teach our children good values. We may not teach them every word of Armenian, but the essence of what our people are about, I think we all hold on to very tight.
When I was reading about your father's and Eddie's trip to Armenia and Turkey, it was very interesting and very fun. I just wanted to ask you, do you regret that you couldn't join them on this trip?
I do regret that. I've had many opportunities to travel in historic Armenia and to Yerevan since then. And I came to Yerevan, people forget this, back in 1990 when the revolution was happening, when Armenia was still a Soviet republic, but only for a few
months. You were covering for Washington Post.
I was working for the Washington Post, and I was working on a novel which was about those events and about Armenia, Turkey, Central Asia. So I was back there at the beginning of this story, and it's been wonderful to return. But yes, I do wish I'd been on that trip with my dad and Adi.
Before that, your father was, for 2 years, the president of Washington Post. So everyone knew your last name. Did it help you to start a career at Washington Post, or it didn't it didn't matter at all?
It's a big family. It had pluses and minuses. I think that the truth is, in the news business, you really are only as good as what you write, what has your name on it. And over time, my work became identified with me and my journalism. Yes.
Is he your reader?
So my dad is my first reader. I've written 11 novels, and I give them to my father right after I give them to my wife. So he reads all of them. I often will talk when I'm writing a column. Before I sit down to start writing, I'll talk about the issues with my father. It's unusual. My father's 98. He'll turn 99 next month. But he is as sharp today as anybody that I would find as a journalist and a columnist in Washington in terms of the basic issues. So I'll sit with him in his study. We'll often have a martini cocktail, and we'll just talk about what's going on, and I'll try out different ideas from him. Sometimes I'll steal lines just directly that he says that are so good, and I'll say, "Pop, I'm going to use that."
How come, being in 98 and to have this kind of a sharp mind? Is it genes, lifestyle, or something that...
So my father obviously is a rare man, a part of this long life, but long life with such intense intellectual focus is good luck. And my father would be the first to admit it. My father has become increasingly a religious man, and so I see him in church every Sunday. My father used to say before my mother's death, I was kept alive by God to take care of your mother. Now that she's gone, I think, what's my purpose? Well, one purpose he has is to share his story, share his knowledge, and he feels that deeply. And I think the final thing is that my father has taken very good care of himself. He's careful about what he eats. So, you know, he's still a big, strong bear. He does the crossword puzzles. Every morning he gets the hardest crossword puzzle he can find, and he does each little box to keep his mind as sharp as possible. So, you know, that what I've learned from my dad is, first, be lucky. Second, take good care of what you have.
As a true gentleman, he doesn't talk too much about his personal life and about his wife. First of all, my condolences. Your mother, care of kids, 4 of you. Or he was also a companion in a way that your father would consult with him about career or about business.
My mother was a remarkable woman. She was, in a sense, very different from my father. My father was a first-generation Armenian. She was what we say a WASP. She'd grown up in New England. Her ancestors came over on the Mayflower. She was a very beautiful woman. To the day she died, she was really quite a striking woman. And they had a marriage that was supportive, social. They tried to entertain and be entertained in the world that they were moving in. My mother had deep beliefs, very liberal beliefs, like my father's mother was similar. She believed in international peace. She believed in bringing all religions together. There were some issues that she was passionate about. My father ends his book with an image that I want to share with your viewers, which is the image of my daughter, my oldest daughter, Elisa, which is the same name as the name of my father's mother, my grandmother, Elisa. Elisa brought with her from Manchester, England, when she came with her father, Avidus Mateus Jamgochan, a piano, a Bechstein piano that had been made in England, which is now in my living room. And my father described watching my daughter Elisa sitting on the same bench that his mother had sat, playing at the same piano, same name, and he said, I don't understand what immortal life is, but I felt I saw, watching these two Elisas, the one in front of me and the one in my memory, the way in which life lives on. And I think that is the way my dad chose to end the book, and a memory that is very precious in his heart.
When they look at the back cover of the book, saying how it's possible to be a successful man and his 4 kids to be as successful as their father. So it's a, I don't know, big family of successful people that kind of will continue the family. So what's the success formula of Ignatius family?
So again, we were lucky. We had very smart parents, and some of that genetic material was passed to us. We had a gift from them that they let us find ourselves, so that we were our own creative individuals, not copies of them. And then I think finally our stories are stories of the combination of our Armenian roots and our American opportunities. Each of us tried to be creative, took risks, did things sometimes that were hard. We were lucky that they came out well. We always had in our family the anchor of my father and my mother while she lived, that we could come back to. So many families get broken for one reason or another, and that strong anchor point is missing. And I think we know as Armenians how important family is. Family's at the center of our culture. It was at the center of my life growing up. I think maybe that's the most Armenian thing about my father, is that family was absolutely essential for him. He never lost the hold of that.
David, thank you very much for your answers.
Thanks.
We're done.